problem, I think it covers a couple of different concepts, and the concepts here is what I think is the important takeaway. It gives me line L, and I wrote this down 0, 0, and even though the problem says line L passes to the origin is just the middle point, or 0, 0. So it's just using a different word for it. So 0, 0, and -6, comma, -1. Then it tells you that line K and line L are parallel. So that means that the slope for this line L and the slope for line K must be the same, because the relationship between two lines that are parallel is that their slopes are the same. And then it tells me 2 points for line K, which is 3, 2 and x, -1, and really wants me to figure out the point x. So let's first start by figuring out the slope of line L. Keep in mind that the slope formula, which I think is an important one to memorize, is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, which gives me the slope. So let's start with this one. Let's call this x1, y1. Let's call this x2, y2. So the slope here will be y2, -1, minus 0, over x2 minus x1, which will be 0. So that'll be -1 over -6, or 1 over 6. So that should be the slope of line L and line K, because since they're parallel, they must share the same slope. So slope here must also be 1 over 6. Now over here, I know this point, I know this point, and I know this point. So think about this formula right there, right? I know what, and over here, let's call this x1, y1. Let's call this x2, let's call this y2. So this is y2, this is y1, which will be x. I know what x2 is, I know what x1 is, and I think I messed that up. I know what y2 is, I know what y1 is, I don't know what x2 is, I know what x1 is, and I know what the slope is. So let's fill it in. Y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, which will equal 1 over 6. Now let's start simplifying this a little bit. So -1 minus 2 will be -3. X minus 3, let's leave that the way it is, and it'll be 1 over 6. Now let's cross multiply that by that and that by that. 6 times -3 will be -18. And x minus 3 times 1 will just be x minus 3. And now let's add 3 on both sides. So x will equal -15 as my final answer.